Welcome everybody to this video recording that features Kittie Beyer, whose beautiful watercolors are located here in the Roland Park Place Art Gallery in the Stonehill studio. And Kittie's watercolors are on view until February 11th, and she has happily agreed to this interview and to talk about her work. And I'll start out with one probably obvious question, which is, have you been creating art since childhood, and who and what inspired you in those early years?
Oh, I have. I think I was born with a paintbrush in my hand, and my grandmother had made some wonderful paper dolls. My mother was born in 1904, so these were circa 1910 or something like that, you know. And they had this wonderful old-fashioned underwear on, and they had bathing suits that were, you know, I mean, it was just a masterful presentation of watercolors. And then we had a watercolor box of Mummy's old watercolors and sable brushes. We don't need sable brushes anymore because inventions have taken care of that, so that's good.
So did you paint the paper cutout dolls' clothes, or basically they inspired you?
They inspired us. And then I think we did make a few of our own creations for them.
Very good. So then tell us more about how you went on to study watercolor painting, to study art, and then how it inspired you to work particularly in watercolor.
Well, I am ashamed to say that I quit Goucher after one term. They made me take a physics course, which I was not suited to. It was fascinating. I mean, all the ideas were absolutely intriguing. I mean, I picture the men watching the ball go down the incline playing, you know, like a bunch of kitty cats sitting around. And I had a chance to go to Florence, so I studied at the Accademia. That was just the most exciting thing in the world, because there was the entire Renaissance at our...
You were surrounded by it, truly.
Yes, yes. It was just wonderful.
Do you recall which artists had a particular impact on you? Not necessarily on your watercolors, but just in general.
In general, I think it was Botticelli and his beautiful simplicity, his beautiful designs, and that.
And his work flows. In a sense, it flows like watercolor, one might say.
Yeah.
That may be a stretch, but...
No, it is, but the whole thing is a stretch, you know, and yeah.
So, once you began creating, and did you find that you were specializing, so to speak, in watercolor painting fairly early on?
Yes, probably, because watercolors are so portable.
Yes.
They really are marvelous. And with oil paint, you really need a place to mess up the floor
And disposal. Disposal, we won't even
yes.
go into that.
Yes.
So, to expand outward from this, what ideas or scenes tend to inspire you, to get you started, to make you want to do a particular watercolor?
I think it's the light, early morning and twilight or a late afternoon are really, with that slanting light, it explains the shape of things, and it's really, it's just lovely. And then there's also a lot of reflected light. I think you don't want to paint something that is very static, you know. I think everything is moving and changing all the time. Light is moving and changing. Growing things are moving and changing.
I wish I had heard you before I ever started studying art history, because you truly do express the very essence of art making, and that is beautiful. So, looking at your wonderful watercolors, can you tell us about anyone in particular, about why you were inspired, for example, to create that particular work?
Well, it's interesting now, you know, the way people lived on the western shore of Maryland, southern Maryland. They lived on the water, and they spoke Middle English. They had really no contact with anybody else except nature, the fish, the oysters, you know, and it was just wonderful. And then, of course, we went up to the Adirondacks in the summer, and that was just beautiful. Every place you look, you know.
Well, there, of course, you have the added benefit, so to speak, of the mountains and the light and shadows that they cast. I don't think there are any mountains in southern Maryland that I know.
No, there really aren't very many mountains. So,
but
Southern
go
Maryland.
north, and then you do have that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what are the different places that you most love to work?
I'm very fickle. I mean, I don't, I look around and I see a flower with very thin petals. The cosmos. You can't paint it as though it's a piece of china. It's really very thin, and it looks as though if you blew on it, it would move
Almost
a
some
little bit.
transparency.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you try to make it look as though it could move. I mean, not really. And I think that's the same with the light. You have to show the transient nature of life, and it's very interesting to do, but it gives your work a livelier look.
You are explaining how much watercolor captures both light and movement. And yes, oil painting can, but certainly in your hands, you capture both the light and the movement of light and in water so beautifully.
Well, it's like music. I mean, you have to think of what it is you're composing. Is it a fugue, or is it a symphony, or is it a watercolor, or is it an oil painting? And you know, that kind of thing. Things take a certain form.
Absolutely. So, do you have any kind of hierarchy in what you paint? In other words, do you prize landscapes above flowers, or vice versa? Is there, in your viewpoint, is there any kind of hierarchy? No.
No. I'm just fascinated by all of it, and I have painted a lot of watercolor portraits too. And that was in a class at the torpedo factory. And so that was wonderful. The model went away and they didn't have to say, my nose doesn't look like that, you know, and things, which was great. And it frees you up to do what you want.
Absolutely, absolutely. Is there any particular part of the country, of this entire country, that you really most love to paint, or do you find that different parts of the country give you different kinds of fascinating light and so on?
Well, as you know, my husband was in the airline business, and so we flew all over the place, and we went to a lot of the volcanic islands in the middle of the ocean, which was, I've never seen anything like that. These things stick up out of, you know, after days of looking at this beautiful changing ocean and, you know, thinking of what's down there, you know, it's mysterious, it's lovely. But then all of a sudden you see this big purple or black or red mountain sticking up out of the ocean. I mean, it's just, it's startling. And I had a little sketchbook where I had done some pictures of wonderment, that kind of thing. So they're not very good. I mean, you know, it's just.
Don't say that. So, as you have grown and continued to create art, how do you feel your art has changed, or not? I mean, how do you see the progression of your art?
Oh, I think I have learned so much from all my different teachers and all my different experiences and things like that. You know, you really learn what the paint can do. You learn which watercolor is a very dangerous assumption, because a lot of times they go completely out of control or something like that.
Yeah.
Very, which makes it interesting, you know.
Absolutely. So, would you ever consider holding a quote-unquote how you paint with watercolor session? In other words, an actual one-off studio session that people could come to and just watch how you approach a particular.
Well, it's very interesting, because it's the opposite from oil painting. With oil painting, you paint dark to light. With watercolor painting, you paint light to dark.
Oh, explain that more, please.
You can make a beautiful wash of the sky. Don't be too careful. Just wash it in so it looks transparent. It doesn't look like a solid hunk of something. And it's there's a lot of unity. If you know, the distant part of a landscape is cooler colors, and then the yellows and reds and oranges are the things that bring it closer.
More towards
yes,
Earth.
yes.
Yeah.
So it's just it's a technique that almost you have to know. You can observe it, but maybe not do it.
Now, have you ever created just completely abstract works of art, or is just that not where your heart, mind, and soul are?
No, that's not where my heart, mind, and soul are. I leave that to Rothko. I admire enormously, but
It's not
no.
you. That's okay. That's okay. We are so fortunate here at Roland Park Place to have a great many works of art. We don't have a Rothko, but we do have a great many works of art on view throughout the entire first floor of
Yes.
our original building, including two beautiful works by Kittie Beyer. So we are continuing to build our art collection, and we are delighted that we can do this, that it's supported by the administration and by the residents who I
Yes,
think
who have been very
delighted.
generous. Yes.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, these are all donated works of art, as you have said. So,
I think the materials we use are very important
in watercolor.
in watercolor.
Yes, tell us more. I was getting distracted.
Well, no, it's a distractible medium, but nowadays you don't have to use sable brushes anymore. We used to have sable brushes.
Yeah, why? I mean, why did
Well,
you used to have that?
Because my mother had them when she was a child,
Oh.
and that's why, that's what we painted with as children.
It wasn't mandated. in other
Oh,
words,
no,
universally.
but you almost had to. The floppy brushes were just a mess, you know. They didn't know how to make these nice things that sort of spring back. But you have to use expensive paper. The materials you use are very, very important, and the paint you use is very important.
And unlike oil, I mean, once the watercolor's laid down, that is it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. You can make things darker, but you can, so sometimes you can make things dark, but you can't really make things much lighter.
Now, you are holding different kinds
Yes,
of...
I
Can you tell us about that?
well, this is a piece of Arches paper, 140-pound paper, and you can see it's all wiggly on the edge.
Yeah.
The best thing to do if you want to paint on something like this is to dampen it all over and then put masking tape and tie it down so the paint won't pool in those holes and dimples and things. So,
And what about the...
and then this is
Yeah.
a piece of handmade paper, and you can see how uneven it is, and it accepts paint in a very uneven way too.
So how do you plan for that?
It's very, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, watercolor, which looks so poetic, and I don't mean easy, but it flows in your eyes and so on, but in fact, it's extraordinarily demanding. It's the boss.
Well, it certainly has its own personality. It's like a difficult friend, you know. If you want to be friends with watercolor, you have to sort of listen to it, you know, and
That's a beautiful way of putting it.
use your knowledge of what worked before. And sometimes we can have very happy accidents too.
Now tell us more about that.
That is, well, it's a surprise, and you put a little dab of purple by mistake on something, and you think, ooh, ah, and then you think, well, I love it, you know. So it works sometimes, you know. It's just a surprise.
Well, you are a consummate artist, a consummate watercolor artist, so that absolutely, this is what proves the point. Can you tell us a little bit more about the scene with the wine glass on the table? It's a little different.
That was Lake Tahoe, and I was so fascinated by Lake Tahoe because it's navy blue. Most lakes are reflecting, and then I looked up and the sky was navy blue. There's no moisture in the air, so it was so clear. You could see for miles. You could see trees on the distant shore. And I loved it. I really did. So of course we had to sit down and refresh ourselves. I think everybody should have a martini before they start to watercolor paints.
Well, that particular watercolor is just very captivating, and especially looking through, so to speak, to the mountain and back. It's a particularly, I think, evocative.
Clear. It was so clear. That was what
It's wonderful. Now, I don't know if you can see this, the watercolor of the parrots or parrots is just so charming and lovely. Now, is that based on actual birds?
It is based on actual birds. We used to have the parrots from the parrot jungle would fly over, and they were so noisy.
Where was this?
Miami.
Oh, okay.
Playing tennis, we would see this flock of brilliant colored birds, and the trees and everything became very drab in contrast. They shone, they had a light in them, you know. So,
well, you captured them so beautifully, and it's interesting to me that you captured them not against a pale blue sky, but against more foliage, so that makes their green, yellow, and orange stand out just beautifully. So, have you, well, I'll put it another way, do your daughters or grandchildren and/or do they also create art?
yes, they do.
And tell us
Yes,
about it.
they do. My eldest daughter is extremely musical, and she has a wonderful musical memory. And it's sort of the same thing, you know, and there's a great relationship.
Creativity.
Yeah, and she has painted some of her Adirondack furniture in the most enchanting way. It really is just lovely, you know. And my younger daughter is a marvelous photographer, really marvelous photographer. And also, she has done some beautiful calligraphy for me. She wrote me something about disagreeable old person is the worst thing that you could possibly imagine.
And what about your grandchildren?
And grandchildren are very artistic, very, very creative, very artistic.
This definitely is a genetic, a wonderful genetic inheritance.
Well,
and I'm sure they watched you and you exposed them as a result to what it's like to be in the home of a creative artist.
Yeah, we all did it together,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and that was the fun.